The fire spread faster than anyone could believe, licking the walls of the church like it had been waiting for this moment. People ran from every corner, shouting the pastor's name, trying to stop what was already too late. Inside, a woman's cries faded under the roar of the flames. Moments later, the doors burst open and Pastor Daniel walked out covered in smoke, his white collar stained black with ash. His face was blank, eyes cold, lips trembling with words only he could understand. When the police asked him why he did it, he said 7 words that shook the entire congregation to its core. "She lied to me. She's not a woman." What happened inside that church was more than just a crime. It was a revelation that destroyed an entire community. Welcome back to Dark Motives, where we uncover shocking true stories that leave entire towns in disbelief. If you're new here, make sure you hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell, because every week we bring you stories that will make you question everything you think you know about people. Before we begin, comment below where you're watching from. I always love seeing how far these stories travel around the world. Now, this case isn't just about a pastor or a secret. It's about how one lie can burn everything you've built, and how even a man of God can lose control when the truth finally comes out. Let's go back to the beginning, before the fire, before the screams, when everything seemed perfect. Before the fire, before the headlines, Pastor Daniel Coleman was a man admired by everyone in his Washington, D.C. neighborhood. He wasn't just a preacher. He was a voice of hope for people who felt forgotten. His small church on the east side of the city was known for its old brick walls, wooden benches polished by years of worship, and the way it always smelled of candles and rain. Daniel started with nothing but a Bible, a borrowed microphone, and faith that never seemed to fade. He preached on sidewalks, in parks, and at shelters, speaking to anyone who would listen. Slowly, people began to gather, not because he was famous, but because his words made them feel seen and understood. One night after a revival service downtown, he met Grace. She approached him quietly after everyone had left, thanking him for a sermon that, in her words, healed something in her heart. She was kind, soft-spoken, and there was something about her that made Daniel feel at peace. They began spending time together, praying, volunteering, and sharing stories about life before faith found them. Within months, they were inseparable. Daniel often told people Grace was the missing piece he had prayed for. She became a part of his ministry, helping with choir practice, visiting nursing homes, and organizing food drives for struggling families across Capitol Hill. When Daniel announced his engagement to Grace, the church erupted with joy. Their wedding took place inside the same church he had built with his own hands. People brought homemade food, sang gospel hymns, and prayed for their union to last forever. For a while, it seemed like the prayers worked. The church grew, the crowds doubled, and Pastor Daniel and Grace became a symbol of faith and love in Washington, D.C. But every secret has a clock on it, and Grace's time was quietly ticking. For the first 2 years, everything about Daniel and Grace looked perfect. Every Sunday morning, she stood beside him in her white dress, greeting church members with that soft smile everyone loved. They prayed together, preached together, and shared stories of how God brought them through hard times. People in Washington, D.C. began calling them the couple that heaven handpicked. Daniel often spoke about Grace during his sermons. He would tell the congregation how she was his strength, how her faith reminded him why he became a pastor in the first place. Whenever he fell sick, she was right there, praying over him, reading from the Psalms, and making sure the church never stopped running. Outside the pulpit, their home life seemed just as blessed. They lived in a small 2-bedroom house near H Street, the kind of place that always smelled of Grace's cooking and freshly lit candles. Neighbors said they could hear gospel music playing every evening, followed by laughter that drifted through the window. To everyone around, they were proof that good things still existed in a world full of broken homes. But Daniel's sister, Martha, saw things differently. She adored Grace but couldn't shake off the feeling that something about her didn't quite add up. Grace avoided doctor appointments, changed the subject anytime someone mentioned having kids, and never talked about her past. Martha once joked about Grace keeping secrets, and Grace had smiled so sweetly that Martha almost felt guilty for even asking. Over time, though, Daniel began to notice small things, too. There were nights when Grace would stay locked in the bathroom longer than usual, or mornings when she'd wake up before him and rush to dress before he opened his eyes. Once, he tried to surprise her by walking into the shower, but she screamed and pushed him out so fast it left him confused. Still, he brushed it off. He told himself she was modest, maybe shy about her body, and he didn't want to make her uncomfortable. After all, marriage was about patience and trust. From the outside, their love story was still perfect. But behind closed doors, something silent and strange had started to grow between them, and it was only going to get louder. It began with whispers, the kind that move quietly through small churches where everyone knows everyone. Some members said Grace avoided the women's group whenever health or family topics came up. Others noticed she always wore heavy clothing, even in the summer heat, and never changed in front of anyone. Daniel didn't pay attention at first. He believed in privacy, in protecting the woman he loved from gossip. But one evening, after a midweek service, he overheard two choir members talking behind the church building. They said Grace had been seen visiting a clinic miles away, alone, and seemed nervous when someone recognized her. Daniel laughed it off, but something inside him didn't. At home, he started watching more closely. Grace avoided intimacy more often, claiming she was tired or fasting. Her mood shifted easily. Some nights, she sat by the window for hours, staring out into the streetlights without saying a word. Daniel tried to reach out to pray with her, but she'd smile and say everything was fine. Then came the letter. One afternoon, while cleaning the house, Daniel found an old envelope tucked inside a drawer in Grace's dresser. It was from a hospital in New York. The name on it wasn't Grace Coleman. It was Gregory Mason. For a few seconds, Daniel thought it was a mistake, maybe an old family document. But the birth date matched hers exactly. He froze. The paper trembled in his hands as he read the medical note inside. It wasn't long, just a summary of a surgical procedure from years ago, something he didn't fully understand at first. Then the realization hit him like a train. Grace hadn't just been hiding something small. She had been living under a completely different identity. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. He sat in his chair, staring at the bedroom door, waiting for her to come out. When she finally did, he asked where she had been born. Grace hesitated before saying Chicago. Then he asked her about the name Gregory Mason. Her face changed instantly. She tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. Tears filled her eyes as she reached for his hand, but he pulled away. From that moment, everything between them shifted. Every prayer, every sermon, every smile became heavier than before. Daniel wasn't ready to confront her yet, but in his heart, he already knew the truth. And once truth enters a man's heart, it never leaves quietly. The truth finally surfaced one cold Saturday night in November. The air outside was still, the kind that made every sound echo louder than usual. Daniel had been pacing the living room for hours, holding the hospital letter in his hand, waiting for Grace to come home from choir practice. His chest felt tight, his mind trapped between disbelief and anger. When Grace walked through the door, she immediately sensed something was wrong. Daniel was sitting in the dark, the letter on the table beside him. The only light in the room came from a flickering candle near the window. She froze. He asked her to sit. She did. Then he slid the letter across the table and waited. Grace didn't even try to deny it. She just looked down, her hands shaking, tears forming before she could speak. She said her real name was Gregory Mason. She said she had lived most of her early life trying to survive a world that never accepted her. She had left home, changed everything, and rebuilt her life from scratch. When she met Daniel, she had been sure she could start over, that her past was buried for good. Daniel's heart was pounding so hard it felt like it could burst. He kept asking why. Why she didn't tell him. Why she stood beside him in God's house knowing what she was hiding. Grace kept saying she loved him, that she didn't mean to hurt him, that she thought he'd see her for who she truly was. But Daniel wasn't listening anymore. His faith, his pride, his entire world felt shattered. Every sermon he had preached about truth and purity now echoed in his mind, mocking him. He felt betrayed, not just as a husband, but as a man who had devoted his life to teaching honesty and righteousness. Grace tried to touch his hand, to calm him, but he pulled away. He stood up, pacing, breathing heavily. The words, "You lied to me," slipped out more than once. Grace wept quietly, saying she never wanted to live in deceit, but by then he was lost in his own storm of confusion and fury. That night, Daniel didn't sleep in their bed. He stayed in the church office, staring at the pulpit, replaying every moment of their life together. To everyone else, he was a man of peace. But inside, something dark had begun to take root. And once a soul starts burning from within, it doesn't take long for the fire to spread. The next morning, the house was silent. Grace tried to speak, but Daniel wouldn't look at her. He told her to pack a bag and leave until he decided what to do. His voice was calm, but his eyes were burning. Grace begged him to listen. She said she had never lied about her feelings. She said she loved him, that she only wanted a peaceful life. But every word sounded like noise to Daniel. They moved from the living room to the kitchen, both talking over each other. Grace cried and reached for him. He stepped back. He asked how long she planned to hide the truth. She said forever, because she feared losing him. Those words shattered him more than anything. He grabbed the letter again and waved it in her face. He told her she had ruined his life, his ministry, his name. Grace tried to calm him, but he was no longer the man she married. He left the house, slamming the door behind him, and walked straight to the church. He stayed there for hours, praying, pacing, whispering to himself. Grace followed later, hoping they could talk, but she never imagined what was waiting inside. The church lights glowed through the windows. The doors were open, and Daniel was standing near the altar, staring at her with a look she had never seen before. Their quiet life was gone. What came next would shock the entire community. Grace stepped into the church, calling his name. Daniel didn't answer. He just stood still beside the altar, staring at a small metal can on the floor. She walked closer, begging him to talk. He asked only one question. "Why didn't you tell me the truth?" Grace cried again, saying she was afraid. She said she loved him, that nothing about their life was fake. But Daniel's mind was gone. He picked up the can and began pouring gasoline across the floor. Grace froze, thinking he was only trying to scare her. She followed him, pleading, but he kept spreading it row by row. When he lit the match, the flames rose instantly, swallowing the wooden floor. Grace screamed for help, but the fire moved faster than either of them expected. Smoke filled the sanctuary, hiding the cross behind a wall of heat. Neighbors saw the fire first and ran toward the church. They heard Grace shouting inside, but by the time they reached the doors, the flames were too strong to break through. In minutes, the church that once felt like a home became a burning trap, and only one person walked out. When the doors burst open, Daniel staggered out, covered in smoke. People tried to rush in, but the flames forced them back. Grace's cries faded until there was nothing left. Sirens filled the street. Firefighters arrived, but the church was already collapsing. Police grabbed Daniel and pulled him aside. His face was blank, his hands shaking. They asked what happened. He spoke quietly. She wasn't who she said she was. He didn't resist arrest. He didn't argue. He just stared at the burning building like his life was still inside it. At the station, he repeated the same words again and again. "She lied to me." News spread through Washington, D.C. by morning. The pastor everyone respected was now the man who burned his own wife inside a church. Nothing made sense, and yet the truth was only getting darker. The courthouse was packed. People from every corner of Washington, D.C. came to hear what really happened inside that church. Some came to support Daniel. Others came looking for answers. The prosecution called witnesses who saw the flames, who heard Grace screaming for help. They showed photos of the burned sanctuary and the metal can still lying near the altar. They said Daniel didn't panic, didn't call for help. He walked out and watched the fire spread. Daniel sat quietly, hands folded, eyes low. When asked why he set the fire, he said he felt betrayed, that his whole life had been built on a lie. But the courtroom went silent when he admitted he never tried to save her. Grace's friends told the court she spent years trying to start a new life, that she only wanted peace. They said she loved him, that she trusted him more than anyone. Daniel's lawyer tried to speak about the pressure of ministry, his emotional breakdown, his sense of betrayal. But the judge reminded everyone that nothing justified trapping a human being in a burning building. After days of arguments, the jury returned. The room fell still. Daniel didn't raise his head. Guilty. The judge called the act intentional and cruel. He sentenced Daniel to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Gasps filled the room. Some cried, others nodded in silence. Daniel was led away, never looking back. The man once praised for his faith now walked into a life of cold walls and locked doors. And the church that once held prayers and hope became a memory covered in ash. The ashes of that church still sit quietly in Washington, D.C., a reminder of how one hidden truth destroyed everything. Some members of the congregation still gather at the empty lot on Sundays, praying for peace, praying for answers. Daniel spends his days in prison, silent, refusing interviews, keeping to himself. He never asked for forgiveness. He never spoke Grace's name again. He only said the truth came too late. Grace was buried under her chosen name. A few neighbors attended, people she once helped, people who said she deserved a better ending. They remembered her kindness, the way she brought warmth to anyone she met, and the life she tried to rebuild. In the end, this story is more than a marriage gone wrong. It is a reminder that secrets can grow like wildfire, and love without honesty can burn everything in its path. Thank you for watching. Let me know your thoughts about this case in the comments. Do you think Daniel's anger explains what he did, or was there never an excuse for his actions? And before you go, make sure you subscribe for more true stories that reveal how far people can go when pushed to their limits. Tell me where you are watching from, and I will see you in the next one.